Hi, guys. We're here with another installment of Chats. And just before we get into it, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if this is the type of content that you do like and if you would like to see more of. Well, with us today is the owner and director of Boca Raton Kung Fu and Tai Chi. He's an active member of the Florida Wushu League and has studied multiple disciplines. Originally from Colombia, he has gone through many adversities to arrive where he is today. Let us welcome Sifu Carlos Suarez. How are you today, sir?
Sifu Mark, thank you very much for having me and giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
Hey, thank you very much for being with me, Sifu. And I know it's kind of late. I'm very grateful for the time that you've taken to speak with me today. Ready to get to know you and get to know your journey of martial arts from where you started to pretty much where you're at today, sir. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the questions. How did you first get started in the martial arts? Talk about like what you started with so we can, get to know you.
Well, when I was in Colombia, about 11, 12 years old, obviously that time there was a huge influence on Bruce Lee movies. And because of Bruce Lee, I started getting into the Kung Fu. I started doing Kung Fu and also Hapkido. In addition to that, back in the day, due to the youth, we get into different conflicts and, street fights and things like that. So in addition to the Bruce Lee movies and the conflicts on the street, that was like the perfect combination to go and train and watch movies and have this crazy fever about just always practicing and trying to imitate or be like Bruce Lee and a lot of those guys. So that was pretty much how I started doing it. I fell in love with it, and I kept practicing, and trying to learn from different teachers. Then when I moved to the States when I was about 16, at that time in this area where I was in Boca Raton, there were no Kung Fu schools. So I ended up doing some Taekwondo and some karate. And eventually I was able to find a Kung Fu school around the area around 1994. And that's where I started practicing and learning Suaja, which is more or less kind of a Chinese stand-up grappling art that involves open hand forms and takedowns. And that's how I started getting back into the Chinese martial arts aspect of it back in 94.
Oh, wow. So you've really been in it for a very, very long time, and that's very good. So you've been doing Sway Jaw from all the way in the 90s?
Yeah, pretty much. But in addition to that, around that time, MMA came into the picture, and I started wondering also about the groundwork, which, Swaja is pretty much in a stand-up art. It doesn't involve any kind of groundwork. So I started investigating, and for a while I did some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but also always curious about the martial arts. Had the opportunity to do Aikido. And my teacher was a wonderful, a great woman, she's still active. She's located in Hollywood, down in South Florida. And from her, it was tough training all the way around. It was very traditional Japanese training where not only involved the fact that you have to train hard, but also it involved a lot of cleaning. So we would clean the dojo before class, after class. I even had the opportunity to be uchidechi, which means living student. So I lived in that dojo for maybe a month and a half or 2 months or so. And it was like a boot camp, getting up early, cleaning, training, going to work, come back, cleaning, and training for 2 or 3 hours. And after finished training around 8:30, clean again. And that was pretty much the routine for a while.
I definitely understand that. I think anybody who has a traditional martial arts background can definitely understand the chores aspect. When you're not training, you're doing chores, and that's training in itself as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a great time.
That is great. That is great. So you started out with your sway jaw, so you have that one aspect, right? Yeah, you said it's more standing up. So it's more stand-up wrestling,
Yeah.
right? So you have that aspect and you have that range. And so, you find something, you see something where it involves a range that you don't have. So you went and studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which brings it down to the ground game. So you can have more of a all-around combat theory, basically, right? Stand up, go down as well. Do you, so you teach Suejo, sorry, but do you happen to teach in your classes somehow a hybrid mix, or would you just say it's still traditional Suejo?
No, I believe in the mix, as you mentioned, because I don't believe in one dimension, and I do believe, nowadays I can hear when I used to read about Bruce Lee, how he criticized the traditionalist. He was against that. And with all due respect to many traditionalists out there, I am as well, because I believe that it's our duty to investigate, to open our minds. I'm a big fan of Miyamoto Musashi, and Musashi, the greatest swordman in Japan. In his book of Five Rings, he explained that it's a duty of the martial artist to go and investigate and get the proper knowledge. Just as much as a carpenter needs to be knowledge in all the different tools, a mechanic needs to understand every single tool in order to fix a car. A martial artist needs to understand every aspect of any scenario that might happen. That doesn't mean that we're going to be able to master all of them. However, we can gain certain foundations to at least survive or know what to do in certain scenarios or certain aspects, God forbid any conflict that comes along. So I do believe in open style. I believe in investigating and trying to understand concepts and foundations more than forms, more than techniques. Because at the end of the day, the concepts is what makes the art happen. It's like a musician, you as a musician, or let's say you want to learn how to play the guitar. Just because you learn how to play one tune doesn't make you a musician. You need to understand the foundations of that instrument, the concepts of the instrument, and once you do, you're going to be able to create music out of your heart. But you need to have the foundation. So learning a bunch of tunes, that doesn't make you creative, or that doesn't make you a musician or an expert on certain instruments. It makes you just somebody who knows certain songs or tunes. Same thing with the martial arts. You might accumulate techniques or form after forms, but the reality is that, number one, we don't have the time to practice in all the forms, and every form and every style has its flavor. So you might develop Yubawa feet, but that's not the same thing when you do Shini, or when you do Wing Chun, or when you do Cholifat, when you do Bakmei. Every single form has its flavor. So it would take us a lifetime to try to duplicate them or try to learn them all. So might as well, try to learn the concepts of certain things and incorporate it into your own practice for your own development.
And it's funny, right? As you say that, the style that you teach is Shuejiao, and from I have a very limited knowledge of Shuejiao, right? What I do know, Shuejiao, it is a grappling art, it is wrestling, right? And as being such, Shuejiao doesn't really have forms, right? Like how
actually they do. They do a set of forms, but they're single forms for specific techniques. For instance, they have a hip throw. They have a form that you can practice in a solo manner and just drill that solo form, imitating a hip throw over and over again. In addition to that, they have certain tools that you can use as your own belt, which is like a karate belt. And you just go in a way that you throw it over your head and you're imitating the motion of your hip throw. So you're training your body to function in a certain way. So in that aspect, they do have certain forms. but they're single forms
Okay.
for specific
So
techniques.
it's so the forms aren't just aren't as complex put together techniques like say in Cholifat or probably even
Correct.
Bakme or something.
Correct.
Oh,
They're
okay.
just
Understand.
single. Yeah.
No, I think no. Could that be because of how your mind is your mind is actually conformed in such a way that because of your style with Shui Gel not having these these set combinations of attacks, right? Since you don't have that, it's your mind is you're more able to 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 grasp more aspects of combat, really, instead of looking at just this one thing. Like, okay, for example, in Cholifat they go chun, then a pun, then a kum, then a chop choy, right? So that's a set thing. Whereas, okay, when Swajo, like you're saying, okay, I'm going to use this and I'm going to hip throw, or I'm going to use my belt and it's going to help me, go through the whole technique, right? So instead of going through technique as a drill, you're using one technique to go for, say, the specific scenario. You're more able to adapt to your situation. Would you say that?
Well, that's kind of the goal in the last few years of my life. Um, when I started doing the Swaya, I had the opportunity to start doing Tai Chi as well, and Tai Chi based on Swaya from the main guy, or at least one of the very well known masters from the past days, from the 60s and 70s. He ended up making up and creating his own Tai Chi style based on Yan style, except that he incorporated a lot of Swaya moves. So even back in '94, I got intrigued and I started learning Tai Chi. Then I had the opportunity to train under a great Sifu, Andrew Chon, and he's very good in many things that he does. But one of his main foundations is Tai Chi. So one of the things that I started learning from him specifically is to be able to be open to react to whatever the situation presents. You cannot have a prefix set of anything, because, for instance, when I started working with them, a lot of the Winchan guys that were not used to being grabbed like a wrestler. So for them, it was like they were out of their element. Since we were classmates, we started exchanging and like, okay, you can do this, you can do that. But you have to have the open mind to be able to adapt to anything that comes your way, because not everybody's going to react the same way. In the classroom, I mean, we get used to practicing with our classmates and they react a certain way. And in Tai Chi, you do push-hands and they react a certain way. But when you do push-hands with, let's say, a very soft woman, her reaction is totally different because they have almost no tension. So then it's like you have to adapt to that. You practice. I had the opportunity to train with the Krav Maga great guy down in Aventura, and I was with him for a few years, and I still learn from him other aspects of self-defense. And obviously, the way they train, the reaction is completely different to what I'm used to with Chinese martial art practitioners. So it is always having this concept of developing the body. Now, one of the biggest influences in my life has been the last 5 years when I started training under Sifu Adam Eisner. And that has been something that is way out there. To the point when many people criticize him because when they see the video, it looks like it's fake, or it looks like it's staged, or it looks like it's not real. Having the opportunity to touch hands and learn from him, I mean, not only he's real, but also the way what he teaches is about the development and the transformation of body and mind, which is the real aspect of how technique can work. If you don't have the power, if you don't have the body for it, it doesn't matter your technical aspect. And one good example is Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, I've seen videos of him for the last 2 years. He's about 55 years old. Technically speaking, he looks fantastic. I mean, he looks so quick and so everything perfect when it comes to technique. However, he doesn't have the stamina or the juice anymore to compete with 20-year-olds.
No.
Because obviously the power is gone. Obviously 55, I mean, as we get older, we lose that. So the development of body and mind is extremely important in what we do. Where, and this is to quote Musashi, he used to say, it's not about speed, it's about timing. Timing. And Musashi, for those of you, any viewer who might not know, he was the greatest swordman in Japan. I mean, he was able to survive over 60 duels. And duels back in the day was to the death. In addition to the duels, he survived 3 major battles. And obviously, he kind of knew what he was talking about. So one of the emphasis is develop timing. To develop timing, mind is to be calm and be in tune with everything around you. And that's one of the things that comes from the Tai Chi practice. It comes from the meditation aspect, and it comes from being open-minded to be able to adapt to anything that comes your way.
I am absolutely in awe of how you're able to draw inspiration from so many different sources to bring it back into that one point. That is absolutely awesome. My next question for you, Sifu Carlos. Earlier, you had mentioned that you had a teacher of a Tai Chi teacher who was incorporating Shui Jiao techniques into his Tai Chi, correct?
Yes,
right?
correct.
Now, here's my question, right? It segues straight into this question. Are there similarities between Shui Jiao and Tai Chi, right? Seeing as how they're both stand-up grappling.
There's some. I mean, I would say there's some, but also depends on your what level do you want to take your Tai Chi in. Because I mean, Tai Chi is an art that easily can become pretty external. And sometimes, you know, during the heat of the moment of doing push hands, it can turn into a grappling match, you know. So yes, I mean, there's a lot of elements of sweeping and grabbing and joint manipulation and things like that. But also depends on the practitioner. If you find yourself seeking a different path, seeking a different goal, where you really want to turn it into more internal, and I gave you an example before as somebody like Meissner, that this guy, you know, I mean, he whatever he touches makes a fly, you know, and there's no technique involved. It's just the way his body is been transformed to release pawn, to release this energy, you know. Depends on each person's goal, you know, that you can make it more internal or external. Internal takes such a long time to develop, and it requires a state of mind where pretty much you become egoless, because it's not about proving anything or trying to demonstrate in that aspect, because it becomes more of a competition, which is also fun. You know, it's fun to go and compete and play with your classmates and have fun. But bottom line, it depends on the person's journey, where you want to go with this art, what you want to develop. If you want to focus on the internal completely, you need to give up certain things, which includes the external, because the external interferes with the internal, you know. And not only Meissner is a preacher of that, but Sifu Andrew Chan, which is located in Fort Lauderdale, I mean, also he was a very advocate of no external training, in a sense of, you know, calisthenics and weight training and things like that, because it would stiff you up. And that's, to me, coming from a wrestling and a Swaya background, it was a very hard thing to let go and to readapt to a new journey. Because, I mean, doing exercise is always fun, you know, lifting, push-ups, everything is fun, it's great. But the more I became aware, I start feeling, you know, the stiffness, I start feeling the disconnection of my body due to all the hardness accumulated on the muscles. So that is counterproductive to what I want to achieve. But at the end of the day, is well, like I mentioned before, it's up to the person and their journey, what they want to accomplish. It's not for everybody. It's not the path that everybody needs to follow. One has to be true to oneself. And if one feels that, hey, running is good for your health, so go and run. If you feel like, hey, I like to box, go and box. If you like to lift weights, go and lift weights. That's up to each person and what they want to achieve on their martial or internal training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. That is a very complete and thorough answer. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit, okay? Because now we've gotten to the last question, sir. Let's go straight into it. If you could teach the new generation of martial artists, right, just one thing, only one, what would you teach
them? That is a very tough question to answer. I would say transformation of mind. Being able to transform mind. That would be my 2 cents in the thing. I mean, right now we live in a time where people have instant access to knowledge in many different areas, including martial arts. So technically speaking, they would learn from many different sources. But the reality is that for the most part, everybody focus on the technique or on the physical aspect, but very few talk about mind. Very few talk about dealing with fear, emotion, and at the end of the day, you might have all the tools in your belt, but if you're not able to have that balance where you're able to control fear, emotion, anxiety, I mean, you can even become useless, and one of those examples is in the Olympics or any high rank competition where athletes have been training for a long time. They have the discipline, they have the means, they have the team behind them, but maybe that day, mentally speaking, they doubt themselves for a few seconds, and those few seconds are what makes a difference. For one example, a very good example is Tai Chi as a martial art. Tai Chi as one art is a very good art to develop certain aspects. But to become a very good martial art, you need to have a very strong background in other arts where you understand fighting. Tai Chi by itself won't do the job, okay? So if somebody, mentally speaking, they believe that just because they do some certain things that they can sustain a fight, mentally they're gonna be broken down. I'm sorry, they're gonna be broken down because the moment something happens and it doesn't go their way, everything is gonna be freestyle. Everything is gonna be rigid, and any knowledge is gonna go out of the window. And that applies for pretty much anything, So mind is extremely important to develop, also to develop good character, because we don't want to end up with a bunch of egotistical fighters trying to prove something with each other, but instead, with people that can defend and fight for themselves, but also are thoughtful, are in peace, are an expression of help and justice in a way, and I know this might sound corny, but that is the purpose of it, that is the idea, to defend somebody, or to also avoid certain confrontations because you're able not to involve your ego on it. And at the end of the day, that's the best self-defense, foreseeing any incident that might happen. And for that, your mind needs to be clear. For that, you need to be free of any negative or contaminated thoughts that might end up affecting your judgment or your ego.
Nice, nice, nice. So it's transform your mind so you will be able to embody Buddha, embody martial ethics. Very nice. Very nice, Sifu. Very nice. Dan, again, that was a perfect answer. I completely 100% agree with you, sir. Well, I do have to thank you for your time because we've actually run out of time right now. And I am very, very gracious for the time that you have spent, for the little bit of knowledge you have shone upon us. And I hope we can do this again, Sifu.
Thank you very much for having me, Sifu Mark. And
no problem. But before we go, Sifu, right? If anyone wants to get in touch with you, How do they do that?
Well, the best way, they can search on the website Kung Fu Tai Chi Boca Raton, or just place Kung Fu classes in Boca, and I'm the first one up there that appears. So that's the best way they can.
All
Or
right,
they
no
can look
problem.
me out on Facebook as well, Kung Fu Tai Chi Boca, and same thing on Instagram, Kung Fu Tai Chi Boca.
All right, all right. Thank you very much, Sifu.
My
All right.
pleasure, Mark. Have a good
It
night.
was it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, sir. Bye bye.
Bye bye.